Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for inviting me to this brief talk, and apologies I couldn't be there in person. I did miss Richard's glorious introduction, but I'm Sam, I'm a GP in the northwest of England and lecturer at the University of Manchester, and a lot of my research relates to cancer detection in primary care. And one of the main reasons is because we know in the UK that about 70 to 80% of all patients with cancer start their diagnostic journey through primary care. So this graph is slightly outdated, but it's from the cancer registry that's showing different routes to diagnosis. And the dark green line trending up over time are what are now dubbed the urgent suspected cancer referrals, where GPs see a patient with symptoms or signs that might relate to cancer and refer them urgently for diagnostic testing. And that's the most common route to diagnosis for patients with cancer in this country. The green line trending down over time is more routine GP referrals, where cancer might not be at the top of our list of differentials, but is ultimately the diagnosis. And the red line that's also trending down is emergency presentations. So these are either patients presenting to us in general practice who have symptoms that require an emergency admission, and they end up being diagnosed with cancer related to those symptoms, or they bypass primary care altogether and go straight to A&E, usually with more dramatic things like a seizure or massive bleeding or something like that. We'll point out that screening, in this country only covers sort of 7 to 8% of cancers diagnosed, and that sort of generally happens outside of primary care. So most patients with cancer, they can't contact the primary care in the lead up to being diagnosed. Now, I can't see who's in the room today, but I've looked at the agenda, and obviously there's people with much more expertise than me in relation to AI research methods. Most of the research I've done would probably seem a bit analog to you guys, but I think primary care is a brilliant area to be looking at for this question for a lot of reasons. So one is we have lots of information about a patient within the health record, not only relating to what kind of things they come and see us with, but medications that they're on, test results they've had, referrals they've had to specialists, demographic data's getting better, lifestyle risk factors for cancer like smoking, drinking, BMI is all within the GP record. And because of the way NHS data is structured, we can link primary care records to other data sets. We can link it to hospital data to look at who went from seeing the GP and ended up in A&E, who got admissions for various problems that can potentially be linked back to historical data within primary care. And we can also link to other data sets, so things like the National Cancer Registry can be linked to primary care data, so we can look at what was the interaction with primary care and then how did that relate to their diagnosis of cancer and their treatment and their outcomes. And it can be linked to other routine administrative data sets, so you can link to Office for National Statistics data, you can link to local authority data, some parts of the UK can even link to educational data. So I think obviously knowing that AI and machine learning methods are data hungry, I think looking at primary care data as an option to try and develop better methods for cancer detection, you have a lot of opportunities here. And there are some very large existing primary care data sets that can be accessed for research purposes. So the most commonly used one for cancer studies is what's called CPRD, which is the Clinical Practice Research Data Link. They have anonymised primary care records for 20 million people in the UK, with a further, I think it's another 20 million historical records for patients that are no longer actively registered with a GP practice in the UK, but have been in the past and can be used for research purposes. And we're starting to see larger cohort studies with primary care data available. So one of the biggest is the Biobank study in the UK of 500,000 people, where you've got all the data gathered as part of being a biobank participant, and half the biobank participants have linkage to their primary care record. So there's opportunities there as well to look at the links there and see what the opportunities are for early cancer detection. I really should mention a colleague of mine, Owain Jones, who's a GP who's just finished his PhD in Cambridge, and Owain has published in this area in recent times. His PhD was focused on AI and machine learning as applied to diagnosis of melanoma in primary care, because that's one of the cancer types where there's been a lot of interest in image analysis to help identify specific changes in moles or skin lesions, which is what we see a lot in primary care, but there's been some interest from Owain and others in AI methods to try and support that, and he published this in the Journal for Medical Internet Research a few years ago about the state of the evidence at the time. It said there's a lot of opportunities here, but it's still at an early stage of maturity in terms of applying AI for cancer diagnosis in primary care. He's not the only person to look at this, and I should point out that there are actually already 2 AI-driven systems that are commercially available, looking at focus on cancer detection. So See the Signs has an AI-driven symptom tool focused on primary care, trying to help GPs spot patients that might need to be sent on those urgent suspected cancer referrals. And that is in use in some parts of the NHS, but not widespread use as yet. There's another machine learning system called Pinpoint that was developed by a team in Leeds in the northeast, and that looks at routine blood test results that are available in the primary care record for patients who have already been referred by the GP for urgent suspected cancer. And with reasonable accuracy, the Pinpoint system can identify patients at very low risk of cancer whose referral may be downgraded to more routine referral or focused on other potential diagnoses. So there are some solutions out there. There are some groups already looking at this kind of area, but I think there's a lot of opportunity with the right expertise and people involved to look at this data much more closely. And the other advantage of primary care is that we have electronic health record systems. We have only a few providers of those systems in the UK, so actually applying these methods in clinical practice in the primary care setting is certainly possible relative to other parts of the NHS where electronic medical record systems are not as advanced as they are. Decades. Thank you very much for listening. I hope today's chat's going well, and I'm very happy to follow up with anyone outside this meeting if they want to talk.
I apologize not to be there in person. I would have loved to be there. So I'm currently somewhere in the French countryside, so I hope that you can hear me all right. The internet connection is a little bit dodgy. So artificial intelligence in lung cancer screening. So there are primarily 2 junctions, if you like, where artificial intelligence can be sort of applied in lung cancer screening. There is both prior to LVCT screenings, prior to the actual screen, in terms of how we identify people who are at elevated risk for lung cancer, and basically those who would benefit from screening. Because, as you know, screening only works if people have sufficiently high risk. So this is one area where AI could be useful. And then there's the second part, after LVCT, after the actual scan, and in particular, to optimize the reading of LVCT images and use the AI to provide the risk assessment. So if you look at the first junction, so this is before lung cancer screening, the idea here is that we want to identify as many people as possible in the general population who will develop lung cancer while screening as few people as possible. And for this purpose, we typically use risk categories, but increasingly we're using risk models. And over the last year, I would say, there have been a number of AI-based risk assessment tools that have been published. And my team at the agency, we do a lot of work in evaluating different risk assessment tools around the world. So the Lung Cancer Consortium is a resource to do this type of work. So this is a consortium of about 25 population cohorts from around the world, about 3 million people who have been longitudinally followed with detailed risk information. And we recently carried out an analysis where we looked at a number of different risk models in European populations to compare them. And here we can see, hopefully you can see my mouse pointer here. Here we can see that if we apply some risk criteria for screening eligibility criteria, these criteria would select 30% of ever smokers in the general population, and they would identify about 6 to 8% of future lung cancer cases with those criteria. If we instead selected a similar number of people using this Hunt model, for instance, this is a traditional model, we would increased that, let's say, screening eligibility sensitivity to 76%. And here I've outlined, sort of highlighted 3 different AI-based models. So you can see here that they perform similarly as the traditional models. So, and this is what I would say when it comes to using AI in general prior to screening, that thus far the models that have emerged, they seem to perform in a similar way as the traditional models. Now, if we move to AI-based radiomics, this is really what this is really the hot topic in LDCT screening, and there's clearly a strong potential for optimized AI-based reading of LDCT images. And people have proposed using AI both as a second reader, so after a manual reading, so after the reading of a radiologist, to sort of spot high-risk models that the manual reader might have missed, perhaps as a triage prior to manual reading as well, but also in general as an LDCT-based risk assessment tool based on the CT images. And of course, if you read all the studies, they typically perform quite superior performance to that of manual readers. And but there is strong sort of concerns how this would actually be applied in practice still. But I think in general in the field there's an evolving consensus of the potential of AI, both to reduce the workload of radiologists, but also to improve the accuracy and the consistency of LDCT reading in the context of LDCT screening. Finally, and this is perhaps not often highlighted, but there is a strong potential also to use AI for image processing, and in particular to allow the use of very ultra-low dose CT images and sort of use AI to improve the resolution of those images, and thereby we will be able to reduce the exposure to the patients to radiation. So I'll stop there. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. Thank you for organizing the event and inviting me to talk about the potential roles of AI in early detection of pancreatic cancer. I'm a consultant gastrointestinal radiologist with special interest in imaging of pancreas or pancreatic pathologies. Okay, so pancreatic cancer is a major healthcare issue on the rise. It could become the 3rd leading cause of cancer-related deaths by 2025 in some countries. As it stands, only 25% of the patients with pancreatic cancer will survive the first year after they are diagnosed. The 5-year survival is poor and has not improved significantly for decades. On the other hand, early-stage pancreas cancer, or the 5-year survival of early-stage pancreas cancer, is around 70%. The problem is that less than 5% of the patients are diagnosed in such early stage. The only curative treatment is surgical resection, but most cancers are diagnosed too late when surgery is no longer an option. So radical improvement in 5-year survival for pancreas cancer will require advances in early detection to improve resectability rates. Okay, I worked on this project with AI scientists, and our paper was published in Investigative Radiology in 2023. And in recent years, many or quite a few papers from excellent teams have been published on the same topic. And these studies showed good performance of AI in detection of pancreatic neoplasm, although sensitivity dropped significantly when the pancreatic tumor was small. So the novelty of our approach was that we trained the algorithm not only to detect pancreatic mass lesions, but also to identify dilatation of the main pancreatic duct, which can be an indirect and early sign of underlying pancreatic cancer. But how can AI help with radiological diagnosis in everyday practice? So image interpretation in early stage pancreatic cancer can be challenging, and most CT scans are reported by non-subspecialist radiologists. And the level of expertise and the high workload of the reporting radiologists might have an impact on diagnostic performance. So AI can be a very useful tool in everyday practice to help radiological diagnosis. And my last slide is detection of early cancer on imaging is only one piece of the jigsaw. So you can see 3 of the many papers published in recent years on new strategies of early cancer detection or early pancreatic cancer detection. So combining identification of high-risk patients with better performance of diagnostics and streamlining pathways of patients with pancreatic cancer into a robust system is the only way how we can improve outcomes in large scale. And I think most researchers in the field of early detection of pancreatic cancer now believe that AI will play a very significant role in development and operation of this future system. And that is my presentation. And if you ask me what input is needed, I think NHS, we have to make NHS AI ready because it is not quite there, I think, NHS. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Shri. I'm one of the gynecology doctors. I work at UHPW. I have another role. I'm also a PhD student. I'm based at Dorothy Hodgkins Building. And my disclaimer is I don't know much about AI at all, but I know a little bit about ovarian cancer. So that's what my topic is on. I'm going to talk to you a bit about ovarian cancer screening and how to incorporate AI, and a little bit about my research project too. So what do we know clinically about ovarian cancer? Ovarian cancer is a silent disease. Majority of women present with advanced disease. So by the time they have all these non-specific symptoms on your left, they're probably in stage 3 or 4. That is the diagnostic challenge with ovarian cancer. So what do we already know about ovarian cancer? So we know that screening improves survival in early stages of ovarian cancer, and treatment improves survival in advanced stages of ovarian cancer. So what has been done so far with screening in ovarian cancer? They've used 2 important tools, which is a blood test, which is CA125, and they've used ultrasound images. And the study is called UK-TOX, and what they found is that screening program did not save lives in ovarian cancer. Unfortunately, that is what they found. So why is this a problem in ovarian cancer? What is so special about this? The most important thing is the Wilson's criteria. Any screening program will have to fit into that box of 5 Wilson's criteria. Sadly, ovarian cancer does not fit into that criteria because we do not know a pre-cancer lesion. There is no established or well-researched guidance on a pre-cancer condition in ovarian cancer. That is the most diagnostic challenge. So the other important thing is, yes, so you incorporate AI in screening and in treatment. So what do we aim to achieve at the end? Improve the survival. And this is where the problem is. So less intervention in healthcare is always challenging. So AI tells you, it gives you a program, and it tells you that, okay, these patients don't need chemotherapy because I don't think these patients, the survival will improve. But not doing that is very challenging. So sorry, this is just me trying to create like an AI model on the left. That's what I've achieved after I've put all what I know about ovarian cancer. So what has been done so far with ovarian cancer and AI? They've used it as a diagnostic tool, as a decision-making tool, and they've used various other techniques which I have no idea about. I'm sorry about that. So this is my vision in the future, how a screening will look like. A screening will have to fit into, let's say, somebody's personalized age, ethnicity, BMI, and then that comes up as low risk or high risk. Is that where we are using AI? And then high risk will then give you a diagnostic test. I'll explain to you what that figure is in the next slide. And then it will either tell you these patients have no cancer or these patients have cancer. What is the challenge? The challenge is from actually establishing that link between patients who do not have cancer, when are they going to develop cancer, and what exactly do we need to do to stop them from having cancer, okay? So this is my project. So what we are doing is, it is quite embarrassing. That is not actually a biopsy of an ovary. That's just a random biopsy image that I picked up from internet, but yeah, sorry about that. So we take biopsy from patients who have ovarian cancer, and then we are growing them in the lab. This is called organoids. This is state of the art we're talking about. And then we divide them into three things. So we use them to get some genetic information from them, and then we test chemotherapy drugs, and we see how they respond. And the response is measured by various different things. So that is like molecular studies, and then the other thing is doing lots of imaging, of course. That's why we are here. And then we are kind of trying to build a machine learning algorithm to see if this genetic information can be used to predict chemotherapy response, okay? And this genetic information will give us a lot of ideas about stage 1 and 2, and that's where screening can be employed. A little bit about acknowledgements. My supervisor here is Dr. James Armstrong. He's my boss. If any of you have any problems with the contents of the slides, please write to him. Or any nice things, please do. He is also based at DHP. He's a senior research fellow with UK Research Institute. And this is Dr. Vincent, who is at the back, sat there very quietly. She's a senior lecturer in the medical school. And this is Aya. She's one of the postdoctoral research fellows. She's a very, very lovely lady. So that is me done.
Hello everyone, so my name's Asfandyar, Ossie for short, and I've been a doctor for about 9 months, which means compared to some of my colleagues here, I'm the equivalent of a medical infant. So why am I here today? So I'm here to engage with many of yourselves and share my perspective as a junior doctor and explain the rationale for our active involvement in the development and integration of AI. As juniors, we're not just the future of clinical practice, but in the field where often it's improvisers, testers, and unfortunately sometimes it's crash test dummies. With 1 in 2 people predicted to develop some form of cancer during their lifetime, oncology is a field where AI's potential and challenges are clear. But my talk today is going to address the broader landscape. Now, we've all engaged with AI, from advanced diagnostic tools to chatbots, and it's exciting and daunting to observe how quickly things are progressing. It's crucial that we stay adaptive and rigorous as we integrate this technology. Now let's take a vague look at how healthcare might be reshaped. So on the one side of this image, we have the traditional overwhelming aisles of medical records, a familiar sight in healthcare, and it symbolizes the substantial administrative load that clinicians carry. The other image is a vague glimpse into the future. Perhaps a clinician using an advanced AI to collaborate on complex decisions or to analyze potential clinical trials, or maybe even give advice on how to explain treatment to a patient in just the right level of detail. In just 5 years, the day-to-day responsibilities of a doctor are going to shift dramatically. Currently, up to 50% of a doctor's time can be consumed by administrative tasks. Tasks that are crucial not just for clinical care, but often serve as legal documentation or data for research. This is where AI comes in, offering technologies like AI scribes that can free us from the burden of paperwork and allow us to focus on what really matters: patient care and evidence-based medicine. But as Dr. Cartesi pointed out, let's just hold on for a second. The transition isn't going to be without its challenges. Despite the existence of advanced diagnostic tools like MRI machines and advanced mRNA-based therapies, many of us still grapple with outdated practices like paper-based records. So I'm saying this to highlight that on the ground, there's a stark contrast in technological adoption throughout the NHS. Now let's just touch upon the ethical side of using this technology. So as you can see on this slide, there's a delicate balance between technology and ethics, much like a tightrope walker. And on the other side of this slide, we have what I like to call the clinical innovation iceberg. At the top, we have regulated innovation. These are implementations that have been tested, approved, come with clear rules and outcomes, and they're often designed prospectively, they're very safe and reliable. Now, drug research is great at getting this right. At the bottom, we have unregulated innovation. These are more messy and complex implementations, often surgical technologies or workflow optimizers, and dare I say it, workforce solutions that aren't fully checked yet. Now, here at the University of Bristol, researchers are actively involved in pioneering new guidelines for complex innovation with the Introduce study targeting surgery. And this rigorous academic work is critical as it will help define frameworks in which technology like AI can be safely integrated. So we've discussed the exciting potential AI holds and its ethical landscapes. Now let's focus on the crux of my talk today, how we as juniors with a fresh perspective can help contribute towards a safe and effective integration. Now our slide here illustrates a fundamental feedback loop. Clinicians, AI tools, researchers, patient outcomes, these all interact continuously to drive healthcare innovation and improvement. To bridge the knowledge gap between clinicians and AI developers, we need to foster a collaborative environment with regular feedback sessions, joint workshops and pilot studies. These initiatives will enhance mutual understanding and ensure these tools are clinically relevant and user-friendly. We need structured programs for feedback and education to ensure that we're not just users but informed contributors to AI in healthcare. Now currently, hospital trusts and foundation schools provide very limited guidance on AI use, and this needs to change. We're often on the front lines using these tools without a full grasp of their capabilities or implications. It's crucial that we, as the clinical community, accelerate our efforts in developing these regulatory frameworks for AI in a way that matches the pace of technological advancement. By engaging with many of the people here, we not only enhance our own practice, but contribute towards the broader medical field's evolution. I look forward to collaborating with many of you to make this a reality. Thank you very much for listening.
I'm Helen Winter. I've got a role here at the university. I'm an oncologist down the road, and I also have the privilege of working for the SWAG Cancer Alliance. And the timing, Richard, is absolutely now, because the clock is ticking, particularly for us who are looking at the delivery of this target. By 2028, to diagnose 70% of all cancers at stage 1 and 2. And at the moment, we're about 50 to 55%, so a huge amount of work to do, but a huge opportunity. And while you just look at some of my thoughts, particularly around that building of trust, the maintaining of trust, the ethics behind introducing AI, and also ensuring health equity, and that any innovation and research we're doing is not widening the health gap, I just want to look to the right, because this is what changed my way of thinking. So about 3 or 4 years ago, I've been an oncologist for many, many years, my best friend rang me. I'd missed a call about 3 o'clock in the morning, and I played it back when I just got to work, and it said, can you ring me? I think my daughter died on our kitchen floor last night. So I rang my friend, ended up in ICU at St Elsewhere, and this was the image that Alice has kindly agreed to share with us. This is what happens if we do not get it right. This was a delayed diagnosis through multiple steps and systems, nobody's fault, certainly not Alice's and her family's fault, who'd been banging on doors for many, many weeks. So I'll tell you what happened to Alice in a moment, but I want you to, when we're thinking about the figures and what we're trying to do, this happened in recent history and is happening, sadly, weeks and months around the country because we haven't got this right. So I definitely want to embed AI and new technologies, because I think the risk of leaving things as it is means that sadly we're going to hear more about people like Alice. But there are huge opportunities. This is a fantastic time to be involved in cancer research. There's cancer genomics and biomarkers, and we need new ways of looking at this big data and interrogating this data, because the answers are there. We just need to find a way to interrogate them. I'm an oncologist, so I can't say a talk without mentioning immunotherapy and the newly launched cancer vaccine launchpads. These are adjuvant cancer vaccines, mRNA, personalised vaccines, made from people's tumours, really so that we can target after surgery and try and improve cure, which is what our patients want. Earlier detection, I've shown you what happens if we get it wrong. Drug development, there's a huge role for AI in that. And then pathway. So this is the non-sexy stuff. This is the stuff we know about that. We've heard already from Hedy and Assi that our systems are not agile enough for our patients. And yet intelligent automation, the digital workforce, if we can exploit that and leverage the amazing capability, we don't have to do it all ourselves. We as clinicians aren't the best to do the admin roles. We don't really like doing it, and we're not particularly good at it. So there are huge opportunities for us to collaborate. So innovations in prevention and screening, obviously before we even get to people diagnosed with cancer. Intelligent automation and digital workforce, and alongside that, I think that upskilling ourselves as clinicians and actually really looking at the way we develop our workforce now, to say you can't say our AI is something that happens over here. I've really tried to upskill on intelligent automation, and I'm getting there. Faster diagnostics, risk stratification, and then this AI to narrow the health inequalities gap, not make it wider. So I've got 30 seconds. So this is Alice now, thankfully, and only due to the emergency services and the air ambulance crew who she now fundraises for. It was no thanks to the diagnostic pathway. She had 2 cardiac arrests and spent 2 months in ICU, had chemotherapy whilst unconscious. Let's work together to reduce that happening again for other people. Ruth is here. Anna Bibby is here, who's embedded research into the Targeted Lung Health Check programme. Do come and speak to us. There's a lot of work we can do together. Thanks so much.
Thank you for the opportunity to present. I'm George, a surgical trainee in the 7 Deanery and also been a recent ACF and clinical researcher. And as some of the other speakers said, whilst a disclaimer, I don't have expertise in AI, I'm looking to develop, build networks and collaborate with those that do have expertise. And thank you for Nina just for letting me change the title of my talk to reflect where we are at the moment. So the latest study at Bristol, we're very much interested in understanding how surgical procedures and devices are delivered and modified in clinical practice. And this has been led by the NHR Bristol VRC Surgical Innovation Team. Why is this important? It's been touched by someone a little bit earlier. In pharmaceutical trials, they're heavily regulated. Innovation in surgery, surgeons adopt new devices, new procedures, new steps, and sometimes the patients aren't informed, and this leads to patient harm. This includes metal hips, vaginal meshes, and we might even see it with robotic surgery being introduced to remove tumours in GI surgery. So the benefits of understanding when surgical innovation is happening means that we can look at when there's successful changes and unsuccessful changes and look at when it's stabilised, and when it's stabilised we can go, do we need to do an RCT? But we can also look to see when we can not adopt things which aren't good in practice. So we've undertaken a few reviews looking at AI in surgery, and this is one of our current ones that we're writing in the results. And this is looking to appraise the use of AI in the analysis of digital videos of invasive surgical procedures. We've got 122 included papers in the last 14 years. And with the more digital data being available, 83% of this is coming from laparoscopic videos, but we'll see that more will come from robotic videos as this is more readily recorded. And most of this is limited to one data set, not applied clinically. using less than 50 videos, although there can be up to 2,000 to 5,000 frames. And also, unfortunately, they're not all reporting the size of their training and test sets or how they're annotating their data sets. So that does make it very hard to learn from others. And we found that it's being most commonly used for surgical phase recognition, identifying when tools are present, to enhance intraoperative visualization, so identifying whether there's an artery, a vein, a nerve, something important, but to improve the quality of the images, so reducing smoke that can blur the vision. So this is where we're looking to build our future work. So I'm hoping to submit an MRC doctorate application this year. And there was something called IDEAL that's looking to improve how we evaluate and report surgical innovation with 4 stages, or 5 if we include 0. So similar to pharmaceuticals, we go from preclinical, first in human, to long-term evaluation. And we're interested in 2A, that's that early phase innovation, as I've said about modifications. Understanding when they happen, we know they incrementally happen. And again, when we can see when it's successful, we can share good modifications with people, but drop when bad modifications are happening. So we've got a robotic data set when it was used to remove esophageal cancer when it was first introduced in the UK and also in Amsterdam, Rotterdam. So we've got under 150 videos, but more than one data set. And robotic videos, you've got the metadata at the bottom, but we want to deconstruct these videos, focus on a few steps, a few modifications we know. And the problem with talking to surgeons, we've already done some research on it, they're not very good at telling you the changes they've made. They're not really that aware of them. It's not reported in the forms afterwards. So we'll be looking at the videos, comparing them, speaking to the surgeons again. We've got some modifications that we know, and then building the data set that we will label, and then seeing if we can use AI to detect when these happen. So thank you for letting me speak. I'm very interested if anyone would like to come and speak to me, drop me an email, talk to me afterwards. Thank you.
Hello, thank you. So I'm here to talk about Isambard AI, which is the new AI supercomputer which is coming to Bristol, specifically what it is, what it's for, and how to get ready for it. Of course, Isambard AI was a project which was funded by the government, pretty much announced in November last year as part of the AI Safety Summit at Bletchley Park. They committed about £300 million to bring an AI supercomputer for the UK, which is going to be based in Bristol. It's actually based in a car park. This is the car park at the National Composite Centre. It's very sustainable. They can no longer drive to work. This basically at the back you see is where you have the pod, which is where Isambard AI is installed. It was basically brought in. So the project actually was kicked off, funded in November. The machine is on site now and running in the end of March. This is a government project delivered pretty much on time. So the pod is in the car park. You can see basically pictured here. This is actually Isambard AI itself. It's just one little cabinet of GPUs, but it's going to expand this massive machine over the summer. And it was funded for UKRI funded AI research in the UK, so training large language models, large scale inference, foundational AI, AI safety and understanding, AI for health and other things as well. The aim is that it's open and free for everybody in the UK who wants to do research on AI, where the research has a strong AI component. And it accommodates AI training at any scale. So from your one GPU, small Jupyter notebook, up to you need thousands of GPUs for weeks or months. So again, it's a free resource for UK researchers, including in the health sector. Why is the government funding it? Because AI is just accelerating. Artificial intelligence has moved from a computer science to a computational science. If there is a pattern in your data, the algorithms now will mean that you'll find it, or the AI will find it. The software is accessible to use, it's easy to use, and as the amount of data that you have increases, so you get the capability to increase. And there's this thing called emergent capability, where essentially as you increase the size of the model, you start off with being able to do things like language understanding, but then it can do translation, common sense reasoning, arithmetic, but then explain jokes and do logical inference and semantic parsing. And we'll see the same thing in health, where the more data you feed into it, the more capability these models are going to have. This is why models are growing massively. So this is actually an exponential plot back here. So this is from 2018 to 2020. Models went up from like millions to billions to trillions of parameters within months. And what you see here, this is the open source models appearing up to 2024. more and more are coming. The models are now reaching trillions of parameters. That's why if you saw OpenAI GPT 4.0 released last week, it was singing to each other with the person. It's just the capability is amazing. How can you get ready for it? The way you get ready for it is basically by forming communities, as we're showing here. Look for communities who are already building AI models in your field. Those communities are probably in places like Hugging Face, which is where a lot of models are being published. Think about what data you have, what patterns could exist in your data, what questions you'd like to ask of your data. Most of these questions are being asked in Python when you build your models. Python's quite an easy language to learn in a Jupyter notebook. Like, it can tell you, I've taken people with no programming up to being able to do machine learning in a couple of weeks in a summer school. So you can learn this. There's some resources up here. Ultimately, it all comes down to PyTorch, which is where most of the models are going. And you can start building your models on your laptop or using a free cloud service. You don't need to wait for Isn't Bad AI, but once you've got it working, you can translate to that as we get to later in the year. Effectively, on your laptop, you've basically got something that's got 466 million AI tera operations a second. What we'll get with Isn't Bad AI is 10.4 million of those. Instead of having just 8 gigabytes of GPU memory, you're going to have to mention 84 gigabytes. You can fit in the very, very large models. And I think with that, I'll move on to the next speaker. Thank you.
Thanks for having me here. So I'm Kenton O'Hara. I'm a fairly recently appointed Professor of Human Computer Interaction in computer science. And my interests are in sort of human AI interaction, computer-supported collaborative work, which is looking at the ways that technology enables teams to work together, and also interested in human-centered design. So how can we use understanding of the human context and the ways that people work to inform the design of new technologies, including AI. So the specific question I'm interested in is really within the context of healthcare is how do we design these AI systems such that we can make them meaningfully actionable in the everyday collaborative care practices of clinical care teams. So going back to the earlier talk about clinical pathways and the practicalities of how teams work together, how do we situate the outputs from machine learning models within those such that they can be meaningfully used to improve patient outcomes, importantly reduce clinician workload, and also make care practices more efficient and effective in terms of the resource allocation to particular patients. So how do we do that? We do social studies of clinical practice, so we go into hospitals, speak to clinicians and so on and so forth, do observations of team practices to understand the kind of decision making that they do both as individuals and collectively within teams, and use that to define things like actionable questions that can be useful and addressable by machine learning model development. We also think about the sort of machine learning not just as a data problem, but also thinking about it as the user experience of the system. How do you present that information to clinicians and nurses and clinical teams such that they can be interpreted and make sense of in the context of their work? And then there's the question about what can be automated and what needs to be sort of have more human oversight, and that's kind of dependent on the performance of the models as to when we need interventions. So I'm just going to give you a quick example here about how do we predict patient deterioration across the surgical journey. So can we use machine learning, can we use EHR data and machine learning to provide early insight of post-operative risks? So we informed the machine learning development through observations and interviews with clinical teams, and that's kind of highlighted the challenges of uncertain risk predictions. How do you do direct clinical interventions on the basis of uncertainty? But what you can do is actually use these risk models to maybe inform risk mitigation behaviour in particular contexts of care transitions. So can you, for example, use that to say, do more frequent monitoring of patients? Can you do more proactive ordering of drugs and so on to do risk mitigation strategies on the basis of these risk predictions? I think it's also important to think about the different metrics that we have. So here we have sort of machine learning performance models, but how do we translate that into human terms by translating those into things like what are the numbers of enhanced protocols that we need based on things like true positives versus false positives? And then also, how do we think about decision making in the context of patient groups as a whole rather than just individual risk models?
So, hi everyone, my name is Antonia Zamanaki. I'm in the School of Engineering, Mathematics and Technology, as well as a robotics lab up in the UB French campus. So today, I'd like to talk to you about what we do as a group, and we focus on robotics and AI. And a lot of that is in healthcare technologies, such as surgery and diagnosis. So today I'm going to focus specifically on breast cancer as an example of sort of the capabilities we have as a team. And in fact, this has been a project called Artemis. It lasted about 18 months, co-funded by EPSSC and Cancer Research UK. And we thought it was such an important project that we have really put a lot of resources outside of that initial funding and continuing it. So the question is to everybody, when was your last breast examination? What was it? Was it an ultrasound? Was it a mammogram? Was it a self-examination? And how often do you actually go to it? Do you self-examine? Do you go to your GP? So I'm asking these questions because these are how we started the project, and we had 155 responses from the entire from people across the UK, and we found quite a lot of things about thinking the acceptability, let's say, of how the AI and robotics integrated into the diagnostic process of NHS. And when we found out that screening for breast cancer is offered only every 3 years, that often is not often enough. People that can self-examine don't feel confident to do so, or even they do so, they don't feel confident with the results. Then they sometimes don't want to go to their GP to confirm because they feel they're going to waste their time. They also feel that it's quite embarrassing, a lot of them, depending on religion, status, and they don't want to go unclothed in front of healthcare professionals. And generally, they have very often reported pain, especially during mammograms, and how dehumanized they feel during this process, as well as anxiety waiting for the results. So the idea that we came, with was to try to make a automated examination process for super early detection of any abnormalities, and behind that we feel it's more about maintaining your breast health. Make sure you have frequent examinations, you empower the patient to take charge of their own data. So these sort of mobile clinics can be sent out in mobile clinic outside, in the street, or can be in the pharmacy, or can be in a shopping center, somewhere near work, somewhere perhaps where the underprivileged and minority groups that don't actually have access or engagement with the screening programs can benefit most from them. And at the very end, you can, as a patient, have access to your own data, or if this is deemed to be not the best solution because of the extra anxiety it might cause to you, then they can go to your GP. So very quickly, this is sort of the prototyping that we've been doing. We are developing our own tactile sensors for palpation. You can see one up here is called a new tip, one down here called espresso, and then we made it very small and we called it coffee bean. We also prototype our own robots for examination. This one was called Iris because it opens and closes at the iris of a diaphragm with a camera. And this one is called Lotus. George had a similar name for their own project because it opens and closes as the petals of a lotus flower, being compliant and safe. So finally, the next thing that we have been doing throughout the entire project was to engage and involve contributors in the research from the start every 3 or 4 months, show them what we're doing, ask them what we should do, get updates, give them samples, bring them to the lab if we could. It was COVID, so we didn't. And basically update all the research that we're doing according to the feedback we give them. So as I said at the beginning, this is something that we think is really, really important and hopefully will change the landscape for breast cancer. And this is why we're actually continuing this project, and we are looking at further funding. We're actually applying this month as an outline. Again, very, very much involved with PPIE in this project. So if you're interested about that, please do come and talk to me further.
Hi, my name is James Pope. I'm a lecturer in EMAT, data science. So I said this one's titled Pervasive Health Machine Learning. I didn't get much time to get a lot of pervasive health in there, but maybe to describe it a little bit. We're talking about things generally before you talk to your GP while at home, wearables, things like that. Certainly cameras could be involved, these sorts of things. So hopefully there we go. So we've been using this in other areas. I've been using it quite a bit in cybersecurity, but I would prefer to apply it to basically detecting cancer. So as an example, one of the techniques that we're currently using are graph neural networks. And as you can see here, often data comes in a graph form. And generally what we've done previously is we would then extract that into a tabular form and then run our favorite machine learning algorithm on it. Doing that, we lose a lot of information. And so what we prefer to do, and actually the latest techniques actually take the graph as input to the neural network. So we can actually make inferences on the graph. This is an example of detecting an anomaly between these two nodes. That could be something, again, in different contexts. This one, again, with cybersecurity. But obviously there's also a time component as well that you can imagine. And they've now actually been combined. So these spatial temporal graphs are being used, and at least within the last 2 or 3 years have been used successfully to detect lung cancer, breast cancer, and brain cancer. So these also, I don't want to say that they're interpretable, but obviously there's a little more information that comes out of the model when you look at it this way. So that's one of the techniques I'm interested in, actually, as applying to, how can one say, it's a solution in search of a problem. So in any case, one thing that's a bit more concrete with my research is I've been looking at skin cancer images. As previously mentioned, this is in some sense a success area, being able to detect the images. And as you can see here, you get a picture of a mole and detecting whether there's cancer or not. We're specifically working with the Gene Golding Institute with Hugh and Mohammed Hassan, who are in the room. We're looking at tone bias, but nevertheless, taking these images combined with other data, multimodal inferences can certainly help detect these this much earlier. And so one thing that would be interesting that I at least thought would be looking at, for example, in children, there seem to be a lot of false positives and increasing that the accuracy of that. The point is that I need clinical support because I think that's interesting, but I don't know that that's actually interesting. And so really looking for clinical support on this. So that's it. Thank you.
Okay, hi everyone, thanks for having me today. So I'm going to quickly outline a project that we've been doing as part of the Integrative Epidemiology Unit here in the Bristol Medical School and the CRUK Integrative Cancer Epidemiology Programme, linked also with the NIHR BRC at the University of Oxford and their Better Sleep theme. So we found quite consistent links between chronotypes, that's an evening preference, and increased risk of breast, prostate and colorectal cancer, which also aligns with the well-known observational relationship between shift work and these cancers. A hypothesized mechanism is via artificial light at night and melatonin suppression, which in turn has various anti-cancer mechanisms. This light at night hypothesis has largely been investigated using the International Space System imaging data, but we want to also look at this at an individual level, looking at indoor light exposure through wearable devices. The UK Biobank has wearables on almost 100,000 individuals. We've looked at sleep staging through various ML algorithms, but we can also use the light sensor on these devices to also capture day and night light exposure. While these devices are often worn kind of under clothing or under the bed sheets, we've actually been able to recover true looks from a calibration with a photometer to look at both low and high light levels. There's quite substantial also correlation of light levels across the day, but a basic factor analysis has revealed two factors which we've been looking at to capture day and night exposure, but we're interested in other potential algorithms to look at more refined measurements. That what we have looked at, so with the two factors, we found strong relationships with chronotypes of eveningness, and we've also within this data set got reasonable numbers of incident cancer cases for the cancers of incidence. So that's the next step, is to look at the lux levels in relation to incident cancer. Thank you.
So I'm David Weston, Senior Lecturer in Health Technology over at UWE, and I'm working with Murtaba Dori, who's a consultant in restorative dentistry. And yeah, we are working on head and neck cancer, but I think the challenges we're facing and the ways to overcome them are not very specific to head and neck cancer. So we have, yeah, like many other forms of cancer, we know that very often the NHS targets to get towards the start of treatment are not being hit. For this particular field, we had a meta review, so a systematic review of systematic reviews last year that acknowledged that a lot of research effort has gone into developing tools, AI tools for this area, but there's been very little translation into clinical use, and the first issue that they highlight as a barrier to that is an issue of a lack of standardization, and particularly in the data and how it's collected. So you can train AI on a data set from one particular hospital and maybe show good results, but that doesn't give you any confidence that that's going to work well at a different hospital where they collect those images from a different machine, or have different practices around what metadata they collect with the imaging. Yeah, based on that, we've decided to work on what was identified as the unsexy stuff. So rather than working on developing that AI, our plan is to speak to clinicians and patients and other stakeholders across the Southwest and identify what level of standardization we have already, and what the sort of pain points for applying AI to our clinical data might be. And from that we can draft guidelines on how to make sure our clinical practice is more AI ready, whether to be the place where that AI gets trained or the place where it is applied successfully. Yeah, happy to talk to anyone about it.
Hi everyone, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about my research. I'm based in engineering and the Centre for Ethics in Medicine. Traditional chemotherapy, one of the issues with it is it's not very targeted. It can affect both the healthy cells and the cancer cells. Nanoparticles can be used to assist in the delivery of chemotherapy drugs. And one of the advantages of nanoparticles is nanoparticle design, so things like their size, their shape, and their loading and their coating. And despite the fact nanoparticles have been in the clinic for nearly 30 years, only about 1% of nanoparticles reach a solid tumour. So we can use in silico models, so computational models, to select nanoparticle design based on things like size, shape, loading, coating, to aid in clinical translation. And rather than looking at individual nanoparticles, we can look at them as a collective, so looking at all the nanoparticles and how they interact with each other, and using more active nanoparticles, nanorobots. You could use them to treat and target a tumour, and I'm looking specifically at these nanoswarms, which are multiple nanoparticles or nanorobots that could interact with each other or their environment to achieve a task exhibiting behaviour inspired by swarms. And looking at building regulations in these key areas, and interested in how do we build knowledge and tools in academia for all stakeholders to help expertise across all levels of government and healthcare.
Right, so I'm Colin Campbell, and can we have the slide up? Right, yeah, so I've organised it as past, current interests and future. So in the past, we've been working on machine learning, integrative machine learning methods which take multiple different types of data, predict the driver status of variants in the human genome. This was actually pretty successful. One of our algorithms was used as the mutation impact predictor at Cosmic in Cambridge, and there's many studies using it. So moving on to the present day, these classifiers use a lot of different types of data which are informative for driver status. Just give you one. If you look at sequence conservation across species, if you have a highly conserved region in the genome, then that tends to indicate functionally important. If you've got a variant there, it tends to indicate it's higher probability of being pathogenic. So initially, we're using 30 different types of data. However, Amy Francis, who's here in the audience, has compiled, we've recently published a thing called Driver Base, which is a resource with many more types of data. In fact, we have 1,500, but we want to add in MAVE data and all sorts of different types of data. So these are, they are cancer type specific. These are our performances. We're getting good scores on unseen data, okay? So like leave one chromosome out. So we're also proposing to marry up, this is a very rich area for research, we're also proposing to marry up these prediction tools to circulating tumour DNA, which is a really exciting area, but I'll stop there.
Hello, I'm an electronic engineer with a background in integrated circuits, and a former colleague of mine, while I was working not at Bristol, somewhere else, so he proposed this project and then asked me to contribute as an electronic engineer. So we designed a microelectronic platform to detect circulating tumor cells. So this is the platform we designed, and it has an 25 micron electrode, and you have 100 by 100 array. And once you drop a blood sample there, so you can detect whether there is a cell on that electrode, and whether it is a normal cell or an abnormal cell. So from a normal cell and abnormal cell, the variation is about 20%. So we could not say that exactly for sure that whether it is a cancerous cell or not. So that's the part which is missing. So soon after this, we completed this, and then we both left the place. So we could not continue any further. So now what I wanted to do is, so we can design this platform, the expertise is there, and merge it with some kind of learning, prior learning, and then tell for sure that whether the sample we see has some cancerous cells, what is the percentage, and then finalize the outcome. Okay, thank you very much.
Hello, my name is Alicia, and I'm a research program manager for early detection and diagnosis research at Cancer Research UK. And I'm here to talk to you today about how we support early detection research and some of our funding streams. And I'm really sorry that I couldn't be there with you in person in Bristol today. I'm actually attending a committee meeting, but my colleague Anna, who looks after our comms, should be in the room with you today. For those of you who aren't familiar with Cancer Research UK, although I suspect the majority of you are, we are the largest fundraising medical research charity in the world, and we are the largest funder of cancer research in Europe. And the money that we raise is spent not only on funding research, but on providing information, advocacy activities, and helping to shape public policy. And through our work, we've had a huge impact on cancer. We employ a multifaceted approach to supporting early detection and diagnosis research. I'm not going to go into each of these in huge amounts of detail, just in the interest of time, but briefly, we aim to build the community, and we do this in a variety of different ways. So we run an annual early detection conference to bring together the research community to discuss some of those big challenges and the latest research and to network with one another. We develop strategic initiatives to help plug areas where there are gaps or where there are particular challenges to overcome. We aim to engage industry with early detection and to create opportunities for industry and academic collaboration. And we published thought leadership pieces. In October 2020, we published our early detection and diagnosis of cancer roadmap. If you haven't looked at that already, please do check it out. That suggests a series of recommendations for how we can overcome some of the current challenges in the field and to achieve a vision where all cancers are detected and diagnosed at an early stage. Of course, we fund research, and I'm going to talk a bit about some of our research funding streams in a moment. And we also fund infrastructure. So we fund our International Alliance for Cancer Early Detection, and that's a partnership between 5 different universities in the UK and the US, bringing together those researchers to work strategically to combat some of those big challenges in early detection. So on to our research funding. Our Early Detection and Diagnosis Research Committee meets twice a year to fund early detection and diagnosis research. So this is research which aims to translate discoveries in order to detect and diagnose consequential precancerous changes and cancer at the earliest possible time period at which an intervention might be made. And that also includes the detection and diagnosis of relapse and recurrence. So in the bubbles below, you can see the various different areas of our remit, and I just really wanted to highlight that spans quite a wide area. So that can include research to identify and validate early detection biomarkers. It could be research to develop technology for early detection and diagnosis, all the way through to health systems research and behavioural research into clinicians and patients and the public around early detection and diagnosis interventions. And I've also just highlighted data and computational driven approaches to early detection and diagnosis, as that's particularly important to the workshop today. So in terms of artificial intelligence for early detection and diagnosis, we're keen to see research that develops new analytics and algorithms that could be used to identify high-risk groups of symptomatic patients presenting to primary care. So it could be used for triaging purposes, or that can be used to risk stratify the general population for more targeted and effective screening, or can be used to identify biomarkers or other signatures that are indicative of receiving a future cancer diagnosis, or that can be used to detect an early cancer, or that could be used to optimize image-based screening tools, or interpret digital pathology images for early detection of cancer. And there's bound to be some other areas that I've missed there, but just to give you a flavour of the types of research that we're looking to see. So in terms of the funding streams that we have on offer, we have 3 different streams, and the largest of those are our programme awards. So they're open to UK-based researchers. They are up to 5 years and up to 2.5 million. And this is really for established researchers that are planning to conduct large, integrated and renewable programmes of work that can be really transformative to cancer early detection. So that is a 2-stage application process, and so you have to submit an outline first, and the next deadline of that award will be in September of this year, and that will be seen at our November committee meeting. Then we have our project awards. So these are smaller awards, so they're up to 3 years or 4 years if you include a PhD student, and up to £500,000. And this is funding for specific projects that aim to have a significant impact on how and when cancers are detected. So the next deadline for that is actually coming up soon. It's on the 25th of June, and again, that will be seen at our November committee meeting. And then we have our primary award scheme, which is smaller and looks a little bit different. So that's up to 1 year and up to £100,000. And this award can be used to generate pilot data, it can be used to develop a novel technology for early detection of cancer, or it can be used to apply a pre-existing technology to the area of early detection. It can also be used to support new collaborations. And again, the deadline for that is September of this year. So I briefly wanted to mention a new strategic initiative that we have been working on for the past 18 months. And this stemmed out of a recommendation in the roadmap. And CD3 is a proposed new national research initiative which will be dedicated to using data to revolutionise our understanding of cancer risk and to allow early interception of those cancers, which might be through preventative intervention or via early detection, targeted early detection. So it will be a discovery and translational research effort that will use data science and artificial intelligence to identify and integrate signals of cancer risk across various data modalities and controllers. So that could include electronic health record data, genomics data, behavioural data. This is being led by Professor Antonis Ansteview at the University of Cambridge, and over the past year he's been assembling his research team and trying to bring the best expertise from across the UK together to work on this. And he's going to be submitting a proposal to us in the middle of June around this initiative, which will be for funding for 5 years, an initial 5 years of this programme. And we've been helping support Antonis alongside multiple other partners in the community. So we've been working with Health Data Research UK, Administrative Data Research UK, the Engineering and Physical Sciences Research Council, and also the National Institute for Health and Care Research on this. So I'm aware that this is probably quite relevant to lots of you in the room, and if you wanted to hear more about this, then please do reach out to me, and I can also connect you to Antonis if you aren't connected already. Great, then I just wanted to flag that we have our Early Detection of Cancer conference coming up in October of this year, and that's going to be in San Francisco, and registration is open, so please do register. We've got a session on artificial intelligence and early detection, so I'm sure it will be of interest to this group. Lastly, I just wanted to say that if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to get in touch with us. I put the early detection mailbox email address on this slide. So if you have any questions about our research funding schemes or any of our other initiatives, then please drop us an email. I appreciate that it's been a bit of a whistle-stop tour. Thank you for inviting me to talk to you.
So I'm from the Jean Golding Institute, and we're the university's research institute for data science and data intensive research. And so I wanted to give you a bit of an idea today of how we can support your research. What may be of most interest is our data science support. So we've basically got a pool of data scientists who are there ready and eager to support your research. So this ranges from free data science help desk, so this is up to 8 hours of support, to having a costed data scientist onto your research project. So this can be of various kinds of FTEs. We also provide funding, so we've got SeedCon funding, so James's project is an example of a kind of funding that we have, kind of often used as kind of a proof of concept that then is rolled into a larger research proposal. And then we can also help with those research proposals. So we can give costing advice, also look at kind of the experimental design and things including data ethics, which is something obviously is very important. We provide training, so we do kind of coding courses. So as Christopher said, Python courses could be useful if you're getting ready for Isambard AI. We will provide courses in that and other kind of coding languages. We also design bespoke workshops with you, so if you've got something in mind that you really want to have, get some information and knowledge on, we can design bespoke workshops. And then finally, we have a whole range of events that we host ourselves, as well as we host in collaboration with other people. One of which is Bristol Data Week, which is in 2 weeks' time, which we've got training, workshops, seminars, kind of showcasing all the exciting data science that's happening within Bristol and further afield. And then we have a public event, so pretty topical for today, on the 6th of June in Bristol City Hall, which is AI and the Future of Society. So we've got some QR codes in the networking lunch. So if you're really, really interested, you can book your ticket then. But yeah, if you have any questions, I know that was very quick, I'll be in the networking lunch, as will my colleagues Leo and Hugh who are at the back, if you can wave. And feel free to ask us anything. Cheers.